Hello everyone, I am Bishal Baruah. So today I am going to discuss about the topic open source. So first of all, what is open source? Open source refers to something people can modify and share because its design can be accessible publicly. So the term open source refer to people who can modify the software easily. In production and development, open source is a philosophy or a methodology that promotes free redistribution and access to a product design or idea and implementation details, such as open as in free. That means the software is open to all. Open as in access. Everyone can access to the software. Open as in overtime. It can be run overtime. No issue will be there for open source software. And it is not closed to anyone. Anyone can download the software and use it. Reuse and change. They may also change the source code so that they can use the software as in their own way, and open source softwares are easily accessible. So now I am going to tell about the history of open source. The open source definition was originally derived from Debian Free Software Guidelines. Bruce Barnes had composed the original draft of DFSG, and it is edited and refined and approved as formal policy by the Debian developer community in 1997. So the term open source was then adopted by a group of people held at Palo Alto, California Open Source Summit, organized in April 1998 by technology publisher Tim O'Reilly. So what is open source and how open source is different from closed source? So in open source, public can access and use the source code, but in closed source, public is not given access to the source code. Only the developer can change the source code if they want. Open source software are less in price and closed source software are high in their price. So open source software can install in any computers, but closed source softwares need a valid license to install. Some examples of open source are Firefox, OpenOffice, Gleam, Zimbra, Android, XAMPP, PHP, etc. And some examples of closed source are Google Earth, Java, Microsoft Office, WinRAR, etc. So now I am going to talk about how open source work. First of all, there must be a developer to develop the basic source code and compile the program. So here it is given that the developer has created the source code and compiled the program. Later then the various developers can change the source code to their own use and create the software. At last the software can be used by every developer and they can easily access to it, change it, modify it, and this software can be used by everybody. This is called open source software. So now comes the advantage of open source software. Availability of source code to understand and learn from it. That means the source code of open source softwares are available to all, so they can easily access to it and they can just change and modify everything. Cost much less than proprietary counterparts. That means the cost of this open source software is less than the closed source software. So now the disadvantage of open source. Not generally straightforward to use and requires a certain learning curve to use and get accustomed. Incompatibility issue with software and hardware. Third-party drivers. That means the third-party drivers are basically known as open source. Bad codes and some unqualified people who use it, the open source. Software quality assurance process is widely not transparent. No financial incentive. That means no financial incentive is required for open source software. So now the examples of open source. In programming language, Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby, PHDL and Prolog are examples of programming language, and application software such as Eclipse, GIMP, Chromium, Blender, Firefox, Mozilla, etc. are application software. And operating systems such as Linux, FreeBSD, Android also is an open source software. Haiku, FreeDOS. So now comes the license and copyrights. So some are easy to compile and likely that you don't need to do anything, you can just install the software and use it in your own way, and some are uh, needed with the help of their license only they can be get installed and you can use. So GNU license, GNU stands for the Unix, GNU Unix. So GNU license says that you can only use GPL code if modified or distributed code is also released under the GPL. So next comes the copyleft. Copyleft license used to indicate that such license requires that redistribution of said work is subjected to the same license of the original. That means the license should be same as the original software. So this what the copyleft license said. So there are 6 most common license. Over 90% of open source projects such as GNU, General Public License, Lesser General Public License, Mozilla Public License, Eclipse Public License, and BSD license. So these are the 6 licenses that are used in open source software. So how open source software benefits in business? Open source software benefits in business with the help of the following things: a quicker pace of innovation. That means a new startup business uh, can be launched with their new ideas with the help of open source software. It, and also the strong support from a large enthusiastic community, freedom from vendor lock-in, and open source software keeps your costs down and stays on top of your online business with a fair budget. That means the requirement of the budget is less in case of open source software for any startup business. So in this way how business starts, open source software helps in business. So at last I would like to conclude the open source software as it was a common platform for sharing ideas and putting them into action by developers or other people who wishes to improve a product software. Based upon the key advantage of open source technology, we can finally conclude that open source deserves the increasing popularity. That means everyone can use open source and it is easily accessible to all, so that they can make changes in their own way and can use. So this is Bishal Baruah. Thank you.